afternoon once again, fabulous leaders. I'm Dr. El-Amin. I am currently the interim ED of Feeder for Unit 1 here in the North Division. And I want to welcome you guys to session 5 of Building Staff Capacity for Change, our AP office hours. Next slide. So we want to ground our work in our core beliefs. The work that we've been doing in AP office hours best aligns to core value 2. Effective teachers make the most difference in student academic performance. And as APs, your job is to develop, coach, mentor, support teachers in that critical work. And so that's, one of the purposes of AP office hours. Other purposes are to help develop highly effective instructional leaders who can support the work of the principal, to increase our leadership capacity, to create a digital library of resources. These sessions are all recorded, and then I share them in our AP Office Hours Teams channel, so you can always go back and review what has been shared. And then something that's super dear to me is creating a community amongst Tier 2 leaders so that you guys can collaborate and support each other. And I'll just say very briefly, as I've supported the Tier 2 leaders on the campuses that I serve, when I see that a Tier 2 leader maybe is struggling with getting those spots done or in, I'll suggest, how can you lean on your cohort of fellow Tier 2 leaders so that you can get that done? So I think that it's really important that we realize that we don't do this work in a silo. Next slide. So this has been our AP office journey. We started back in January with calendaring for success. And then in February, we talked about PLC meetings and how to model data-driven leadership. In late February, we talked about coaching in the moment. And I know that all of us have probably grown in the practice of coaching in the moment and providing high quality feedback. In March, we talked about how to monitor the coaching that we're doing, how to document the coaching that we're doing. And today, our the fifth installment of AP Office Hours, at least for this school year, is building staff capacity, creating systems of support all around change, because this year has been change, but every year that I've been in this game for 22 years has brought about some change. And so as leaders, how can we support our teachers and staff to be able to continue to thrive through change? Next slide. So here's our agenda. We'll start with a warm welcome. Then you guys will have an opportunity to connect in breakout rooms. We'll have our presentation, which runs about 15 to 20 minutes. And then we'll have time for a Q&A, and then, of course, our closing reflection activity. We always build in 15 minutes of optional lab time, but I realize that you guys have put in a full day of work. So we do offer an assignment that you can do as it relates to the content that is provided. And always, we welcome you all to share what you've learned and what you've put into practice on our AP Office Hours team channel. Next slide. So here are our session norms. I just want you guys to be present in today's learning. Be open to different perspectives. You may hear something in the presentation today that's new to you. Take up all of your space. If that one's really about asking questions, I have my notebook and I'm going to definitely ask questions. I'm going to be the learner that I hope to see in the classrooms that I visit. Post questions in the chat as they come up for you if you're going to, if you might forget them. And then as always, take care of your personal needs. Next slide. All right, so for our warm welcome, this is, our intro where we kind of get those brain juices flowing. And this presentation today is all about change. So here you have a picture of some fears that are associated with change. Which fear have you, go back to that one, which fear have you experienced this year? So just take about 30 seconds to read that and see which of those fears might you have experienced, might continue to be experiencing. You might note that, you might write it down, but definitely, keep it in your mind. All right, go to the next slide. So we're going to put you guys in breakout rooms for about 5 minutes. Each person will have time to introduce yourself, the campus where you serve, and then share some of those fears that you might have experienced this year. All right, so you guys are going to go to your breakout rooms, and I'll see you on the other side to share what you've learned about each other.
Sorry, I missed the joy.
LaDonna, can you send me to room 7? Does it allow you to do that?
Let me see.
Okay. And the timer is set for it to come back in 5 minutes, correct? I believe so. Okay, I can do it. Let's see. By time. Welcome back, everyone. I had such a wonderful conversation in room 7. I'm sure that you guys, I hope that you all equally had wonderful conversation. Would anyone want to come off mute really briefly and share something that you heard or even what you shared before we move on with today's presentation?
I'll share. So in
Hi.
our group, we all shared a fear of the unknown. I think we all agreed, though, that we're accustomed to leaving our comfort zones in the dust. And I joked that this year we've left it in the Mesozoic era, in the time of the dinosaurs. That's how far away we are from our comfort zones, but we know that is part of education, and we've rolled with it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. For me, I was a middle school teacher. I was a high school teacher, and then I was an elementary school administrator. And I don't think that any of those experiences didn't come with change and uncertainty and, fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of loss of respect, or, whatever, all of those things. So I just think like change is akin to what we do, and then fear is going to come with change. So we have to learn how to embrace that and come up with strategies on how to navigate through it, not even overcome it, because I don't know that we can, but learn how to navigate through it. So thank you guys for leaning into our warm welcome and taking part in our opportunity to connect. Next slide. All right, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for today. Currently, she is the assistant principal at Durham Elementary School, and prior to that, she was a teacher specialist at Sinclair Elementary School. This is her first year as an assistant principal, and she has done a phenomenal job. It has been my great pleasure to work with her on developing today's session, and guys, you are in for a treat. I'm just going to tell y'all right now, all the confidence in the world that you're all going to walk away on the other side of this feeling that much smarter and brighter and in insight, all of the wonderful things. So I will turn it over to you, Ms. Perez.
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me this afternoon and tuning in. So today we're going to talk about building staff capacity for change. And like we did earlier for our warm-up, change evokes fear. And that's one of the things that we have to recognize in ourselves. Once we recognize and acknowledge our own fears, then we're able to model for our staff and our community on how we're going to move forward through that fear and embrace the growth and the things that we're going to be doing as we move forward. But it's also important that we're very cognizant of the fears that our staff and stakeholders can have when change is presented. Are they going to have fear of rejection? Is it going to be fear of powerlessness, like they're not going to have a say? Is it fear of inadequacies? Maybe they feel like the change that's coming up is going to negate the skills that they currently have or the tools they currently have. So we really need to pay attention to those things when we are getting ready to bring forward change. I had a lot of fear of the unknown at the beginning of the year as a new assistant principal on a new campus. I met a few staff members leading up to our first week of professional development when our staff was at NRG. And to help myself get through that, I leaned on the people on my campus that knew the staff and knew kind of the culture of where things were. So my principal, my teacher specialist, and my counselor. So we need to make sure that we also prepare and foster collaboration towards change, including checking in with those that can kind of give you some guiding light. Next slide. So how do we bring forward change and build staff capacity? I found this quote in an article I was reading. Unlike talent, capacity grows out of experience. Capacity is built over time with perspective, opportunity, and support for change. So those 3 items, perspective, opportunity, and support, are what I'm going to focus on for today. I also like this little image over to the left, help people change. Help them by coaching with compassion. And then the change is always a lifelong learning and growth. And I want to really focus in on that because we are human beings that are constantly changing. And sometimes we forget. And when people start to have fear or anxiousness over something that we're changing, It's because they're comfortable, and fear comes from that change. Next slide. So now we're going to go into perspective. We are in that mindset of we're getting ready to communicate the change that's forthcoming. Hopefully you've done your pre-work by this point, right? You've done some sort of root cause analysis, you've created an action plan. So that's something that we're all really good at as leaders for our campus. But something we all need to work on is that perspective on how we're going to communicate that what and why for change. But more importantly, perspective communicates the things that our staff currently have, whether it's their skills or experience that continue to play a vital role. And you have to be also cognizant of the barriers and fears that they might have. So for an example, this is a copy of a letter that I sent to my staff in the midst of a major change happening on my campus. I know some of you guys are driving and listening in, so I'm going to read a portion of it. As we return, it's important to acknowledge that we're entering a period of transition. Change can bring a mix of emotions and questions, but rest assured we are committed to making this transition as smooth as possible. Our priority remains the same: supporting our dedicated staff in delivering high-quality instruction and authentic learning for our students. Your hard work, dedication, and expertise are the backbone of our school community, and there's full confidence in our ability to navigate this transition with grace. Your commitment to our students' success is unwavering, and everyone's efforts are deeply appreciated. So in my communication, I wanted to make sure that I gave that perspective to them as I see you, I got you, and we can do this. Next slide. Going into opportunity. Opportunity is the framework of where change really starts to begin. This is where the work happens. This is where growing capacity begins for our teachers and staff, and even ourselves as leaders. This is the collaboration point. This is where we're giving our staff resources, PD, we're talking through our action plan, and we're putting it into practice. Whether it's a new concept, a new approach, a new way of thinking, whatever it is, we have to give our staff opportunity to apply those changes, make mistakes, learn from them, and continue forward. An example for you is on the right. I created a little graphic for my reading teachers at the beginning of the year. We started with Amplify, and we were kind of struggling with how do we use Amplify? We're an IB campus and a dual language campus, and how do we marry all of that together? So I made myself available after school, and of course with pizza, that's how you get people to show up, right? And giving them an extra opportunity to come and ask for help. But more importantly, it allowed a two-way feedback communication with my staff about how they're doing. And I learned a lot of valuable input as we went forward. And during this mode of opportunity, I also made mistakes in front of my staff, and that is okay. Because what's more important is, yes, acknowledge the mistake that I made, but also how I'm going to get out of it and how I'm going to move forward. Next slide. So here's an example of a different kind of change that happened on my campus. This was that first week when our staff was at NRG, and I wanted to bring this up because sometimes change just pops up on you. And if you reflect back, we all know how kind of that week went, and we decided to quickly do something to give our staff the opportunity to replace their fears and anxiousness about all of the changes they're hearing with something positive, and something as silly as a photo scavenger hunt. So as you can see, we gave out 6 challenges, and this is our wonderful second grade team, and they won it. When they got the picture with Mike Miles, they absolutely won that competition. But again, it was an unexpected opportunity for us to help them through a change that we took. Next slide. So we talked about perspective, giving them the communication piece that they need to follow them through change. We're talking about opportunity. But this is the piece that we think of, I think, the most as leaders, the systems of support. These are the effective things that we do as leaders to guide our staff through change and build their capacity. We create those action plans, but more importantly, it's the execution of those action plans that we really have to focus on. That's when we're translating the strategy into action, where we're taking the plan and actually putting it forth, committing to it, and staying consistent with it. In this graphic, this was an example of the system of support that we put for our dual language teachers. We had a huge growth in our EB population. And so we wanted to make sure that our teachers were aware about TELPAS and getting the kiddos on the computers and kind of getting familiar with how it is. Because, for example, when they take the speech portion of TELPAS, a common thing I would hear teachers say is, well, they know how to speak. Correct, but do they know how to talk into the microphone, hit record, and know exactly what to say? So this was one of the examples that we used to kind of execute our plan. Next slide. When I'm going through my systems of support, I follow these 4 main categories. Essential needs. Of course, when we think essential needs, we're thinking about the materials, the systems, procedures, the follow-through aspects that we need. But I want to bring your attention to balancing that polarity, right? What continued practices are your staff doing, whether it's protocols, types of professional development they're doing, something on your staff is continuing, something on your campus is continuing. We're not changing everything, right? So something good is happening, and we need to make sure that we're balancing the things that are good and are solid with the things that are needing the tweaks and the changes. And so when we're going into our systems of, sorry, y'all, our systems of support, now we have to progress monitor it. Just like our teachers do with student data, we have to also monitor the change. Is it being effective, or is it adding more to the plate and more stress? So creating a benchmark and measure for you to kind of check in over time to help with that commitment and adjustments that are needed. And that rolls into our time, that timeline of that action plan. But more importantly, where are you giving time and opportunity for your staff? Is it at PLC, professional developments? Is it one-on-one coaching? Is it on-the-spot coaching? Things like that. And finally, this is probably the most important thing. If you don't get anything else from my little presentation today, I hope you get this piece. We have to celebrate. We have to celebrate the absolute smallest of wins when people are on board or trying to start that change. We have to show celebration towards effort. Next slide. So here's an example. We had just gone over these we called it visible instruction anchor charts for our teachers during PLC. And the picture on the left is me celebrating a teacher who that day we had PLC that morning. And when I walked into her classroom that afternoon, I saw that she already had it up and she was already using it in practice. And then the picture in the middle is just a little screenshot from our staff weekly, where we were also shouting out other teachers that were embracing that change and giving it a shot. Next slide. So if you will all humor me real quick, if you are able to take a piece of paper and a pencil and put yourself in the middle, write your name and circle it somewhere in the middle of a piece of paper. What I want you to do is think about a recent change that happened on your campus, whether you led it or you supported it, but some sort of change. Now, I want you to think of 3 staff members you found that were easy to work with and were quickly to get on board with that change. Go ahead and put them close to you. Put their names on the paper and connect them to you. These are usually people we have good rapport with, that kind of have that open door policy where they know they can come to you and ask for help and support, right? But now I want you to think about 2 people that you have difficulties with. And I want you to put them off to the side. Go ahead and hit the next slide. Put them far away from you. These are those people that are on your staff that you kind of hesitate. We all do it. Don't pretend like you don't. We all do, right? There's just some personalities or some people on your campus that you have to put a little extra effort in when you are working with them. Next slide. These are the two people that I'm challenging all of us to find something to celebrate about them on Thursday. There has to be something you can celebrate, because in order for us to get those small wins as we work towards change, we have to be able to find the good and the positive in everybody. Even if they're completely resistant to the change, there has to be some sort of compliance or effort that they are still doing towards the change that's being affected on your campus. Next slide. And so I wanted to show this image from one of the articles that I was reading as I was preparing for this presentation, and it really struck a chord with me. Our core capabilities are our teachers, their skills and their experiences. They're constantly spinning, constantly monitoring, adjusting, working with kids, taking in new information, and just constantly spinning the wheel and making sure learning is happening. But then when we present a change or a challenge of a change to our teachers, that core capability might get off balance. And we have to be there as leaders to help balance them back to center. Whether it's change leadership people, as in helping them with the perspective, the communication, giving them opportunities, or just the management side of making sure that we're putting systems and support structures in place to help them keep that balance. Next slide. So here are some more examples of other ways that I built capacity with my staff this year. On the left was beginning of the year when we were looking at our NWEA data. And as we all know, if you didn't have any prior experience, it was a lot to digest at first. And so the way I gave perspective to my staff was I reminded them, you know what these things are. We know what achievement versus growth is. So giving them an opportunity to kind of think about what those definitions are before we started really diving deep into that data really, I think, helps solidify and kind of calm down their nerves about what does all this mean. On the right-hand side is a flyer that I made when I worked at my former campus. We started about 8 years ago an initiative called Genius Hour, where project-based learning becomes a common practice, and creating an opportunity for other staff members to come over to our magnet teachers rooms to kind of get some support and help and talk through kind of how they're going to implement this in their classroom. Next slide. This is a very shocking slide for me. I emailed my staff just saying, hey, favor, if you would like to give me a statement or a video about how my leadership or just leadership in general at Durham has helped you through a change. And this was one of the ones that really hit me hard. Then I wanted to share with everybody. She wrote, we have all had that kid who says, this is boring. We don't have to do this. This is stupid. In all transparency, I have been that student this year for Ms. Perez. As one change layered on top of another this year, sorry, I don't know how to read today, y'all. I have been that student this year for Ms. Perez. As one change layered on top of another all year long, Ms. Perez has remained steadfast, strong, and empathetic. Walking into my room finding LODOLs out of date, Ms. Perez did not rush to write me up, but instead asked, how can I help? And reminded me of why I am here to teach. Even in my lack of compliance this year, Ms. Perez was quick to help me address my hesitations. Even though she had to write me up, it was never out of malice. I knew why. Ms. Perez gives me the opportunity to make mistakes, but holds me accountable with a smile and a we can do this attitude. She has made this very difficult year of change a little more tolerable. I have always been determined to do my best for my students. Now I will do my best for Ms. Perez. Next slide. And here's a video of one of my teachers.
Hi, my name is Bailey Weiss. I am a third grade teacher here at Durham Elementary, and Ms. Perez is my assistant principal. I am so grateful to have Ms. Perez as assistant principal. I am new to teaching third grade, so at the beginning of the year, Ms. Perez would come into my classroom and model instructional strategies, behavior management strategies. She was consistently giving me on the spot feedback and coaching that was intentional, constructive, and something that I could use right there in the moment. Ms. Perez is always hands-on in the classroom. Not only is she hands-on, but she also asks if we ever need anything and consistently coming into our room to see how we're doing. We just recently had changes here at Durham that really affected the whole staff, and she really made it a point to, reach out to everybody and make sure everybody's doing okay. But the one thing I really value the most in Ms. Perez is that she takes feedback from her teachers. So whether that is suggestions on what we're doing in PLCs, or our lesson plan template, or the curriculum that's being taught in the classroom, she wants to do whatever it takes to make sure it feels like the teachers are being listened to, and that we're getting what we need.
And I wanted to share this video too to remind us all that as an assistant principal, sometimes we may not be leading a whole school-wide change, but we are working with our teachers that we're appraising, and we are implementing that change with them individually. And then our final slide here are some resources that I used. Leading change together, it really goes into far more in depth about how to lead that capacity change in your staff. I just picked perspective, opportunity, and support just to kind of get the basic pillars of it, but this book really goes into deeper detail. And then on the right-hand side are just some general organizations that I lean heavy on, especially when I don't know something and I need to find some answers. Next slide. And I want to close out with a quote. There is nothing permanent except change. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Let me see, I gotta hit my react. I gotta hit my clapping hands. Thank you so much, Ms. Perez. I enjoyed hearing your story and the things that you've done this year at Durham to support your teachers through all of the changes that have happened. Next slide. So it's question time, guys, and I know that you have lots and lots of questions for Ms. Perez to provide any clarity on things that she shared. She shared fun activities. She shared PLC. She shared how she helped her teachers learn a new instructional strategy with Amplify. I'm going to say this right now. Your teacher who shared so vulnerably, so transparently about, hey, I was that trouble kid for my AP, and she had to write me up. She had to slap me on the hand, but I'm grateful for it. So the first thing I want to share is this is something that I coached my teachers on when I was an assistant principal is you got to build in those opportunities for people to give you feedback. So, any AP Tier 2 leader on a call, if you don't have this in place, definitely do it. Create spaces for feedback, create spaces for affirmation, where your teachers can tell you what you're doing that's hitting the mark and the things that they need you to tweak so that you can continue to support them in ways that help them grow. I love that. I loved the video. I loved the testimony, the honest testimony that the teacher provided. One of the other things that you said that resonated with me is make mistakes in front of your staff and model how to move forward. I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay.
Would you share a mistake that maybe you made?
Thousands, to be frank, thousands of mistakes. Simple things, right? From like, as a CTC, thinking I had the right dates updated, and you guys know how we had different variations throughout the year, and staff members calling me out like, wait a minute, that's not the right date. And it was a culture at the beginning of the year of like, I got you with my staff, like, ha, you got the wrong date. And I was very honest in front of them. And I go, you know what? You're right. Thank you for catching that. Thank you for being a team player. And I threw it back that way. And so now my staff is a little bit more like, oh, wait, she pays attention. She actually will acknowledge when I make those mistakes. And that tends to help.
You know, we often say be the change that we wish to see, you know, and so if we want our teachers to be, you know, open, we have to be open, right? If we want them to be open to the feedback that we give them, then we have to be open to the feedback that they give us. Thank you for sharing that. Come off mute and ask some questions, guys. We have a fantastic presentation, great experience. I want to hear your questions. Or even your comment about how great it was, if you want to share something that you learned or something that you do that was affirmed.
Hey, this is Mr. Rodriguez. So I just want to say, that was a really great presentation. I mean, you're so organized with everything that you created, all your graphs, your charts. Your campus is just really, they should be proud of having you as an assistant principal.
Thank you.
Thank you for that affirmation, Mr. Rodriguez. He's a fellow CTC, Ms. Perez. You know that. I'm sure you guys have worked together. Other questions, comments, celebrations, affirmations, aha moments? All right, next slide. All right, so for our optimistic closure, complete this sentence, and I want you guys to drop this in the chat. One thing I plan to incorporate into my practice is, so what is something you heard shared today? Now, of course, Ms. Perez shared with you guys a challenge that on Thursday, you need to think about those two people who are furthest away from you on that graph that you made. And you're going to come up with something that you can celebrate them with. It reminds me of when I was in the classroom. And, you have students who right off, well, I'll just say that when I was a classroom teacher, I made sure that the first thing as I learned something that I could celebrate about my students. And then, of course, with my students who had the most misbehavior, I went over and above and beyond to find ways to celebrate them, particularly as they made progress towards behaviors that I wanted to see in them. The same thing for our teachers, the same thing for us. We all want to be affirmed for the work that we do. So definitely keep that in the back of your mind, but share in the chat right now, what's something you learned today that you're going to incorporate into your practice? And I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna start you guys off because I'm gonna celebrate two people on Thursday. I love the idea of celebrating your struggle bunnies. Thank you. It says a lot that your teachers felt supported enough to offer honest and thoughtful feedback. Absolutely. While I'm nervous about being vulnerable, one thing I plan to incorporate into my practice is seeking similar feedback from my teachers. Iron sharpens iron, that's for sure.
Can I say something about that?
Absolutely.
So one thing that I know is very fearful for us is when we do open that feedback up, that it's just going to be negative, or you're going to get an onslaught, or it's going to become a podium for people to air out their troubles. But if you do it constructively and consistently, then you're going to see that it's going to become a two-way thing. And if you do have those people, I love my favorite phrase, I hear you.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it just works every time.
Yeah. Oftentimes our teachers who are struggling do need the most celebration. So I really feel like you offering us that is a nugget of gold. So definitely thank you for that. Valuing people's voice, the campus I was at yesterday, we just kind of talked to teachers about their experience this year and some of the things that they weren't able to do this year that they missed. And part of it was, celebrations and fun and just being silly with one another. And we were like, well, let's do it then. let's bring it back. So, all right, I've got one thing I will incorporate into my practice is celebrate small and big wins. All growth should be celebrated. Absolutely. Definitely seeking feedback from my ELAR team that displays that I'm growing as well, but most importantly, that we're growing with one another. That's got to be one of our shared goals. One of the things that I shared is that as leaders, we have to take the posture of learners because this is all new. And so if we don't approach this through the lens of learners, we're going to struggle. That's number one. And number two, how do we empathize with our teachers or our students? Because they're going through change. And if we don't put ourselves in the same seat that they're in, it's going to cause more struggle than it needs to be. Keeping positive, supportive while pushing is the common direction is key. Definitely, we all have to be moving in the same direction. So thank you for that comment as well. Thank you so much. And guys, keep dropping it in the chat. Next slide. All right, so your assignment, if you choose to accept it, create a plan for implementing and write a goal for what results you'd like to see. Okay, I don't think I typed that up right. Create a plan for an activity. I'm sorry. Think of an activity from today's presentation that you would like to do with your staff. Create a plan for implementing it and write a goal for what results you'd like to see as a result. And if you do that, we'd love for you to go to the AP Office Hours channel and drop in what activity you chose. Oh my goodness, you chose to do. See, Ms. Perez, you got me not.
It's been a long day.
You chose to do. Miss Baptiste over at Steven says challenge accepted. I love it. And gosh, it's just gonna bring such great feelings. And when you celebrate, you get more things to celebrate. So definitely take the challenge for your assignment. Next slide. And then, of course, share it on our AP Office Hours channel. That is what that little link right there is for. Next slide. And you can create a short video. I loved the video that the teacher created, and you can upload the video. I have been saying on the campuses where I support, memorialize things. I have one principal who has, transformed the campus, and I'm like, write this stuff down. Somebody else is going to find themselves in the same seat that you sit in. And if you memorialize it, and that now becomes the steps, the guide for someone else. But also, and Ms. Perez and I talked about this when we were practicing. When I was a teacher, when I was an administrator, we would go through the practice of celebrating each other, just writing little notes on slips of paper and putting them all in an envelope or a jar. And then people would take them back. To this day, I still have those things. And so the things that we talked about celebrating, I have a hard day. I will go home and find that envelope that my fellow teachers wrote to me, that teachers that I coached wrote to me, and of course, the one that my 7th graders wrote to me. And it brings all of the memories back. So, I'll say this about well-being and taking care of yourself. Oftentimes, we look outside of ourselves for someone to come and help encourage us and get us pumped up, but we also have to learn how to do that for ourselves. And so creating those little things that you can say, you know what, I need to read somebody who loved me because today I ain't feel too loved. So let me remember way back when 7th graders just loved coming to my class. So videos can be that as well. So creating videos to memorialize your experience, having your teachers create videos. So if you feel so, definitely do that. Next slide. These are just some guidelines for making the videos, keeping your face in the frame in a quiet area, your camera is still, and speaking a loud, confident voice like Dr. E today. Next slide. Thank you guys so much. You know what? I should have that survey in a link so that I can drop it in. So let me find that for you. But of course, if you can scan it, I would love to hear your feedback. As I said to you guys at the beginning of this session, this is our 5th and final AP Office Hours for this school year. I would love to hear your feedback for improvement so that next year we can, and we'll start, maybe in July or so and have them once a month so that we can continue to support the great work that you guys are doing. I'm about to drop the link to oh, you got it. Thank you, Tish. Tish is on top of things. That's my girl right there. I have the best team of support. We're all support people, and we support each other in supporting each other. So there you go. Ms. Perez, thank you again for being our final presenter. This is a wonderful way to end our AP office hours. You did a phenomenal job. Thank you for sharing your story, your practices. That's it, guys. Have a fantastic rest of your day, a wonderful Wednesday off. Rest, relax, restore, and we'll come back on Thursday and do it all again. Take care, everyone.